Duke. Hi, Dan. Hi, Katie. Hi, Colton. Look at Duke. Okay, Mr. Duke. It's our only vehicle that has a male name. And I feel like after all the stuff going through what works, Duke really works. And I attribute that one to Dan. I am so grateful for the opportunity to, I feel like I say that with every car, but same deal, like had this vision, start going on it. The more of these we get to do, the more I feel the vision. And what I mean by the vision is it's not Frontier and the Truggy and a little bit of Vivian all didn't have like strong vision, meaning I couldn't see them for their final form in like complete form. It was kind of getting through the process of how they looked and starting to, as you're building them, you're like going through the pace of what they are. But like the Range Rover, even the Carry Bronco, you know, Duke, these ones are like really heavy duty, where I see these concepts. I think they're because they're full builds that we've done, where I can start from the beginning and they're dramatic, right? Like this thing has this chopped cab and it's stretched, and now we're gonna build the body out. You guys wanna see like just a really rough little kid drawing from the side? This is only a little bit of the ways in, but you can see. So this is an actual picture of the cab on here and the shell, like the roof and the cab sitting here in the shop. And then I've just added the fender proportions. We had the grill in there already setting there. So this is to scale. And it's also, you know, I set this thing at bump compression so we knew where the wheels needed to go. So there's a pretty good example of what we're going for. And I think that's a good like entryway into these headers. These things go from there. You can see chassis, and then you can see what these things do. So this header system is gonna be, think about like a Viper, a Dodge Viper or a Cobra. They have a really prominent running board rocker kind of header exhaust. And that's what we're gonna have here. This, you know, the track width where the tires are versus the width of like the outside width of the cabin, there's a significant difference there, you know, probably under 2 feet, but you know, definitely like 18 to 20 inches per side where this thing is narrow. And then it needs to get this rocker panel that goes right here, and then this fender that comes up. So under the rocker is going to be the exhaust. And that'll go, and then it'll exit. And even on that drawing, I had it a little tilted up, so it gave a really sick kind of exit that was favoring going up and being the wheel opening. That's why like there is intent with this. And the exhaust won't just be freestanding. We're gonna have a beautiful support structure that's gonna come in here, and that's also gonna double as a step. So then when there is like a carbon panel here, that carbon can be a direct bolt onto the top of that plane, so you're not actually like, oh shit, you know, stepping on carbon. There's a landing pad for the composite there that's right pressed on it. So when you do step on it, yeah, you're still stepping on carbon. Probably be like grip tape, maybe even a piece of like decking or something that you put in here, like a boat. You guys will know, like, you know, on boats, a lot of the flooring in there is like a material, and that might be a really good thing for right here. It also might not be. It might not be good at all because of the heat. So regardless, you know, there's gonna be a step to get in here. There's gonna be a big rocker out here. I think that's gonna be the picture that we're gonna paint, and that's to show why the exhaust is like this. This is also a real good win because we're favoring the footwell in here. As much as, you know, let's just do this. So you can see, like, even if I'm short, right? I have long legs, I have a short torso, but I'm 5'10". So, you know, Dan, we built this thing for Dan. Dan is every bit of 6'4", and he sat in here and it was incredible. So really, even when I'm like building the footwell area, I'm like, all right, how's this gonna be? And I try to like float all this crazy extra mass, which is a lot more than Dan actually is. But what we did with the headers, is we wanted to bring everything up. So all this area in here, this is free game. And it really clears, once we put the sheet metal in here, you're gonna have everything you need to drive this thing with 2 feet and comfortably. You know, it's something we need to live by. You can see the plellum is on here for the throttle body. This needs to just go whoop as fast as possible. So even if his knees are out here, we're giving him all this room, you know, and he's still constrained by the bolstering, but it's just a length thing, right? And I'm doing extra, you know, if I go back. But it's tight, but it's tight like if you were flying in a fighter jet or you were in some kind of a performance aircraft. It's a cabin space. It's a cockpit. It is not a leisurely, you know, cab of a truck. So you get what you get, but thinking about running Nora or something in this, my dream is to be able to have Selena the Tundra, Carrie the Bronco, and Duke the Willys all run Nora all together, all 3 of my clients, with myself, with my guys. Joey, you probably won't get a pass. I'd love to have you, but it's just reality. And we all run these cars together. I don't know if Ryan would run the day car in Nora. That would be epic, but I just don't know. That's like a super hyper car. So I'd love to see that. And with that, you know, we want to be comfortable, at least in a couple positions. And it's not super orthodox, but it's also a lot better than like the Frontier, for instance. There's enough to do what we need, but especially down here now, every inch counts, like the dead pedal, right? Instead of having a dead pedal where this tube is, like the dead pedal can be down, recessed where your heel can go in towards like the chassis, you know, and sit down in there, and then you start operating. We've ordered the brake system, so same thing with this one. This is gonna be the ABS power brake system, 12 volt system, redundant package, doesn't run a hydro boost, doesn't run off your power steering, doesn't run off vacuum. It is its own accumulator. It lets you do quite a bit of cool stuff. But the other thing that we're gonna have to add here is another system, meaning the brake itself is gonna, so on my truck, Beth, outside, there's a hydro boost system. But the engagement for the hydro boost, no matter what, you're still having to press the hydro boost. You know, the only thing that's, you know, the thing about the hydro boost is it's assisted power, right? It's running off the power steering system to add pressure. But no matter what, there still has to be leverage to push the brake system in. And the Masters, since my hydro boost on Beth is in the back seat or behind the back seat, I have a slave cylinder for a clutch. So clutch pedal, you know, and manual transmission, you have a slave cylinder. It's essentially you're pushing the clutch in and then it's going through a hard line, and that pressure is pushing the slave cylinder remotely somewhere. So all it really is it's just a remote system that's one-to-one. You press on it with the brake pedal or a pedal, and you put the other thing somewhere else and you plumb it, and that thing pushes somewhere else. So what we're gonna do with this is, because of the constraints, we're gonna run a brake pedal with a slave cylinder. The slave cylinder is gonna be plumbed to a remote master, which I think is gonna go in a void under here. And that's gonna be our power brake system. The reservoir will be remote fill, so we'll run a fill portion somewhere where we can fill it, hopefully outside the car, just because it's brake fluid. And that's gonna be, you know, a secondary system onto the brake system. So there'll actually be 3 systems. What we wanna do is also find a way to put a parking brake in here. If we don't have a handbrake, which, like looking at this right now, there's no reason we couldn't have a handbrake to grab. But we want that as its own thing, just in case there's a system failure. You don't want to have, let's say this, if you can have redundancy with your brake system and you're not relying on that power brake, you know, if that stops working or something happens with it and you have nothing, you want to have a secondary. So even if it's just a handbrake where you're like, hey, we can limp this thing home just using the handbrake, cool. So we're going to end up either doing that, whether that's a handbrake or it's an automatic, like just some kind of, it's got to be a handbrake, because if it's automated, then it's only going to be like a emergency brake and you're not going to be able to pedal it. So need to figure out where the handbrake's going to go. The sheet metal on the other side, I can go through with you guys. Things we're going to want to cover right now is going to be the passenger side sheet metal. We're covering the headers. We're going to go under the car. We're going to look at the skid plates, and then we're going to look at the rear tin work. I think we're good on that, and then we'll close out. This is how tight we're playing this thing. Running this pretty close. About 3/4 on the maximum for constraints. What we'll do here is we'll deflect this. So exterior deflection for heat, interior deflection and insulation. But what we need is every bit of foot space we can. Even if the footwell doesn't require that for your feet, there's a human nature thing about being in confined spaces. Like, it's just a thing. And so you want to try to find comfort as much as you can. And like I said, believe me, when this thing starts going together more, it's gonna get even tighter. And we need to, like, every single bit of space matters. So same thing. This is the footwell operation in here. This clears the starter. The starter drops out from the bottom. It is serviceable. Nothing's that close for areas like that where you're going to be wrenching on something, but we wanted to just maximize it, and that's why it even bends back over, because your foot spacing, you know, can go like this, and you can just adjust your feet and be happier. Areas like this portion is opened up because this is where some of the AC ducting is going to have to run, and the ducting is going to be hardline. It's going to pop through here. There's going to be at least 2 or 3 here. They'll run through here, and then they got to funnel through here, and they got to hide up here. This whole thing is going to turn into packaging. It's not going to be like voids of space. It's going to have to be tastefully done, because some of the packaging is going to have to be visual and exposed. It's an opportunity to take it as a design challenge, not something where it's a, oh man, bummer, it is what it is. No, there's ways to take wins off this thing. And I think functionality wins. You can do that, and you can do that in the right way where it all clicks and it all works. So what we're doing while we build all this, just every step of the way, it's kind of like chunks. You know, at some point here, I can't do any of this until we really figure out, you know, we have to get the intake done, and we have to get it right at least to this point, and then we have to get the AC lines, and we have to run them super tight up here. And I think what we're going to have to do is also, we're going to probably have to run AC lines, you know, right here. One will go up, you know, one will go over. Maybe these two will converge, and then they'll just favor the driver, you know, but they can be details. It's just all of this stuff is going to have to be thought out in a way where it all clicks together. This is a, you know, this is a tight puzzle piece. This is not just a big old truck, and it's not just a big race truck. It's a very tightly packaged hot rod of a pre-runner. So with that, everything's got to be thought out. It's a challenge, and I think it's going to render awesome results, but it's just a lot of different systems. It's also thinking about priority layers. You know, what has to come off first? What's most important? These are the things when I first started building things and taking on projects, and even if it's not a full car, the lessons of priority layers, meaning like what needs service first, second, third, can you get that first part off without taking more shit off? That's the thing that you can do. You can bury stuff into layers where you have to take off 4 different layers of something to get to something that you'd have to service often. Like say an air filter, you know, or something like that. That's something that requires a very short service interval where you need to be on it all the time. You know, fluids, things like that. You can't bury them, or I mean you can, but it sucks. You don't want to be stuck where you're taking so much. This thing, classic thing, this thing sucks to work on. When you come from an art and design background, guess who fucks that up? Me, because I don't come from a mechanical background. So I'm fortunate that I have guys that are hardcore mechanics, and I hire, you know, I talked to you guys about hiring off drive and ambition, but you know what the second one is? Well, second one is no vices. That's actually probably the primary. The third one is mechanics, mechanically oriented. I want guys working around me that have worked on stuff and they are familiar with working on stuff and how stuff comes apart, so they can say, you know, we're a team around here. I don't just make the calls, I talk to my team. Same thing, I'm thinking about running this over here. What do you think? Well, if you do that, it might be hard here. If we shouldn't do this there, etc. So getting this stuff squared away where we can service it, even if it looks wild, is the name of the game here. And we try to consider that more and more on each build. There's some pretty cool stuff under here. You gotta see like right here, dude. So we talked about this one last, right? Film this part first. So we talked about this area. And now what we have is, look at all the removable panels. Sick. Look at that, dude. As long as that's not your dome.
It wasn't on my ass.
Okay. All right. So there's thought into here. These shapes, you know, all of this is built off of priority. What needs to come out? What does this need to clear? Sometimes what happens, can you see me at all? Sometimes what happens here is you build like, and dude, I say all this stuff, you guys, because I fucked everything up. I fuck stuff up. Life, business, relationships, parenting, builds. I fuck stuff up until I get it right. And I'm not even saying once, I'm saying whatever it takes for me to learn my lesson. The lashings will continue. So with this, you know, what I do sometimes is I start on one side. So that right now under here, there's a dry sump tank here. And there's the hydraulic jack system, which is a standalone system. So electric to hydraulic jack system under here. And I'll build one side out in badass shape, and I won't understand that the constraints for this side are different because this demands, this has a thing that pokes out more than that, and I already got that far, and then I go, oh shit, now I gotta make this one different. So it's always important to check your left to rights, and if you're trying to get symmetry, figure out which one has more of a hangout. And I know these things seem obvious, but I promise you, when you're just in the zone like me, I'll just go full stupid mode on some of this, and why didn't I check the other side? So I always try to make sure, if we're doing something where there's symmetry involved, what side is pushing constraints on each plane, and what do we need to build around? Like say maybe this side has a tank here, but over here it's got something that pushes out that way. So we know we need to build over to here, and we know we need to build out to here, you know, and then we find a middle ground, if we can, where we can build both of these panels symmetrically. The other thing is this trim guy. So this is a pass-through because right behind here is the fuel cell, and there's tube work. But here is the only option we're gonna have to run plumbing or to run any kind of electrical. So we know, and this shape here is all because of the rear end housing. The rear end housing has about an inch from everywhere up here, or it's gonna clear. And that's still cutting it tight, especially when you have bulkheads for brake lines and breather, etc., that are coming off the housing that need to go onto the upper links. So this is all, you know, same with service. You take this off, these two come off, You can service the sump tank. You can drain whatever you need to. You can service this. They don't need to be weld on because you'd be shooting yourself in the dick if they were weld on. All this stuff is to seal the cab, but the cab sealing stops right around at the C-pillar behind the third seat. So this is gonna be sealed and we're gonna keep building up, but all this is removable and it doesn't need to be sealed. Something else to look at, you can see we have our 2-track in here. I've gone through my concept with that as far as why it's a design detail, and I like that concept. I find myself, some of the most enjoyable off-road bombing around in cars is like deep, gnarly 2-track, because it hooks you in a different way, and a lot of the race course ends up being like that. And the hang up on these cars is always this straight tube right here, and it's too fucking low, and you bottom out and you're fucking denting the shit out of this, or you're feeling it in the chassis. So what we did with this one, even this angle of approach, if you compress the whole car and you take a straight edge and you go off of this tube, it goes all the way in line with the trailing arms, all the way to the pivot. Where there is, this is not lower or anything, it's literally the leading edge of the trailing arm all the way up here. But this portion, the 2-track is just like it sounds, right? It's a rutted road for a 4-wheeled vehicle, meaning that the center point of that is the highest point, and then the walls on the sides of the tires is high. So when you're going through whoops and 2-track, the center of the road is super high, and it's going to be the most eligible thing back here to bottom out and either damage your car or to hang up your car, slow you down, cause damage, or make it not feel good when you're doing it. So this kind of win is a staple that we've done we did it on the Exotic. I think that's the only one we've done it on besides this, but that's where we took the visual, and the functional cue from, is this guy. This is our belly pan. This is all 3/16 aluminum, 50/52. It's root pass right now. Can you see this stuff? Yep. Okay, so this is the return, right? So this is called an anti-peel edge. What this means is that you can, you could just build the skid plate and you could go right to the tube work up here, the chassis tube work. But what happens is a lot of times if you're bottoming out and you're in like rocky conditions or something, sometimes those rocks, they hit the edge of the aluminum that's thicker and they start to peel it back, or they damage it. So what this does is this lets stuff slide off it and it streamlines it, at least when it's moving forward, right? And then everything is prioritized here on how it needs to be serviced. So like these side guys are probably not going to see the same service as this central one is. This central one is going to be for your underdrive, for a lot of your plumbing, and for your transmission, and to change your oil. So this one's going to come off. We didn't want to have any overlaps, because then you're going to have to take one off to get to the other. So everything just has a clean seam on here. And then there's also like a split here because the rocker, this thing has kind of like a boat hole chassis where it's flat in the middle and then it spans up and out. The portions on the back here, so these lead off, and what goes in here is a Geyser Brothers jack pad. So there's a 12-inch diameter jack pad that fills this whole area, and it sets here. It's also higher than, the leading edge. The trailing arm is lower here, so the jack pad never turns into a hang up, and if it does, it's already flush to this thing where it's sitting here. So it's just whatever's going across here, if it sucks, it's just going to suck right onto the jack pad and go back. Also, look at the tin work back there. Ooh, that's pretty. So there's a lot of details on this thing that are coming out great. Just again, my gratitude for the clients is huge, and the opportunity to construct these vehicles. So let's get out of the bottom of this thing. Pretty good example of what's going on behind the panels too, if you guys want to see. So fuel cell's out right now. You can see the cradle supports, right? And this is just all stuff where I know the tank's elevated, where it's not living directly on the tube. So it's supporting. You know, it's registering in here, it's supporting. Dry sump tank, Era 1. We'll get a sticker on there, Anthony. Congratulations on your little one that's on the way. This guy is your pump and your tank. So what I was talking about, you can see where these tacks are. Ah, a little teaching wand. This is all gonna be sealed. So we'll have partitions back here. You know, it'll be sealed all the way into the window from this area. You know, we'll try to get some kind of venting through here, but at least we'll start sealing this up so everything from these tubes forward is your cabin seal. And that's why all this is okay to be removable, because this is kind of, it's not completely open air, but it doesn't need to have a dust seal or a water seal or anything. So it's all your mechanical stuff back here. Stuff to look at. These guys I have are, these are your shoulder harnesses. They're just, you know, they're ready, they're root pass, so they're ready for final welding. I feel a little dangerous right now doing this, but this is what you got. So these guys sit here and they put your shoulder straps at this right length. Is that the distance? No, this is the wrong distance. I was gonna say it's way far away. Hold on. There's the move. All right, now we're talking. That feels better. So shoulder straps go in here. You can see these pivots. The other thing is, we try to get wins on like tie-ins. We know that there's gonna be sheet metal, an enclosure that's gonna come off of the shock mount here, and it's gonna go down and tie in down there where you can pull this whole enclosure off to service the shocks. So we didn't wanna put these tabs down low here where then we can't streamline all the sheet metal for this. So they sit up here, and then they also do a nice detail with the support structure tying into the shock mount. So this guy goes to here. Don't drop them, don't drop them, don't drop them. This is our mock-up for this guy, right? Danger, danger, danger. So right there is our rod end mock-up. This is just a nice detail, it's removable. Does it need to be a rod end? For sure it doesn't, but it's just, again, it's a nice subtle detail. You don't really need to adjust anything, but what that does is that this triangulates this thing. You could just weld this here. The other thing I don't like doing is, for serviceability, I don't like welding things like this onto the chassis, because then they add, it's like I have a shotgun, is it a 590, M590 that's got a big magazine on it? It takes away from streamlining it, which makes it less effective for getting in and out. You know, it's the same thing. A shotgun you want to be able to carry in a jacket, you know, or having it's just a stick, right? You lay it by your bed, you have it on the floor, you pull it somewhere, and then you add a huge magazine that comes off of it, and then you add another dimension where it's not as feasible, and that one would probably be not as tactical. But this is the same thing. If we're powder coating stuff, we're upholstering stuff, you don't want to have things just welded that are protruding off the chassis unless they need to be. You want stuff on sub-assemblies and brackets. Very similar with bedside mounts, right? You don't want to just have a tube that you weld to the chassis that's this bedside mount. Like, what happens when you damage it? So now, instead of unbolting something, you have to cut it and then grind the weld and then re-weld, and then you have to also put heat into a part of your chassis structure over and over again because it's not bolt-on. It just, same deal. So all of this stuff we try to do like in sub-assemblies where it just streamlines it. It's the same thing if you're upholstering it. Like, do you want to build a bung hole around something that's welded, or do you want to be able to nicely capture and then, you know, put a through bolt through? So I hope that makes sense. But that's our harness stuff. Things to expect. We're getting into the detail stuff, which means it's not gonna look as wholesome as big blasts of tube work and panels. And we gotta start putting components on. We gotta start doing the details. Things that, you know, usually take 10 hours to do, where you do a bunch of stuff and a bunch of mass and volume. You know, you have a bracket that takes 10 hours. It turns into that. So we're transitioning into that phase. There's quite a bit of silicone bronze welding. So at some point here, you know, we have 2 steps to do. We want to get as much done as we can before we weld the shell on this thing and like extend all the sheet metal onto the body where it's sealed and it's contained. So all this stuff we want to have welded. The floors we want to have welded. Any other extra bracketry needs to be on. That needs to be welded. We want to flip it upside down, weld everything before we put the body on. What we have to do is, there's certain things that require the body going on. We have it down pretty good where we can get it with the forklift, scoop it on, drop it, you know, and do test hits and build with it. But next week, Matt Taylor's going to come. We are going to start the rendering and model design process of this, meaning I'm going to work with a guy, Andreas. He is a badass. Andreas is going to work with me on designing the entire body on this thing, all the exterior. I'm super particular because it is Morgan Clarke design. So I don't want or require help as far as what it needs to look like. What I do require is someone that has the skill set to turn this thing into a badass model and do renderings. I will be working closely with Dan, the owner, to make sure that he's in agreement with what we're doing and shapes, because, you know, I do try to personalize these to the client where they're happy with what they're getting, you know, and they're paying a premium. So like if I can involve them in the design process, it's exciting for them and they get to kind of choose and see ideas. And the other thing is, I'm not in a place where I'm closed off. So if someone has like input, where Dan says something and he's like, well, what do you think about this? I never go, well, no, it's not my idea. I look at it and I go, okay, that might actually be a good idea, and I'll pivot off that. If we're all going towards the most premium end result, then that's all I'm about. I don't have the fucking ego to need to be my way or the highway. So next week, shell on. We're gonna set the grill shell and the headlights in a way where they are gonna be fixed and they're not gonna move. Matt's gonna come and he's gonna scan everything. We're gonna put it at compression, scan it, lock, scan it, you know, ride height, all the shit. So we have all the data. The other thing he's gonna scan is cooler locations. So trans cooler locations like we talked about with PWR, rear radiator, so we're not doing guesswork. I gave them rough dimensions, and then we were gonna go through this thing where they build me mock-up like boxes with fans on them, send those out. So we're gonna skip a little bit of that, and we're just gonna scan a couple select areas so then they can build the most optimal cooling package for those areas. So pretty exciting. Things we need to work on: we have the brake system ordered, we have the pedal ordered, we have the slave cylinder, actually just came. So we're gonna wanna figure out brake control and throttle and really dial those in before we just make a footwell. Does that make sense? We just wanna make sure the functionality is there, and then we'll build the footwell around the demands of the throw of the pedal and what they require for space. It'd be nice to start the intakes, but this is gonna turn into a thing. I'm already doing it. Even when I'm talking to you guys, I'm all, oh boy, task overload. I need to get, you know, for me, the most helpful thing is the whiteboard. I can go over there and I just start blasting stuff. But a lot of times when I'm with the guys, I get on my phone, I start notes up, write down the stuff, and then, you know, prioritize and execute. Figure out what has to come before the other stuff, you know, execute it. How do we execute it? What do we need? And I just start going down the list, because these things, they're complete machines. They have tons of systems in them, and, you know, there's an order that things need to be done that is never always the same to get the end result that we want. So I appreciate you guys watching this stuff. Like I said, dreams for this thing, I think is Dan and I, we run Nora. We go down and rip Nora. If Jeff can go with Carrie and Pilgrim can go with Selena, possibly Ryan brings the day car, we all go down, and there's 3 or 4 MCD1 cars running Nora. Bucket list item. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the support. If you can, like, comment, subscribe, share the channel.